So in today's podcast, we're going to talk about time management. Now, if you're an extrovert and an optimist like me, you always believe in your ability to get from point A to point B within a certain time frame. Even though logistically that journey might take about 15 minutes, you feel that you could get there in about 7.5 minutes or even 5 minutes because in your mind, you never really fully take that risk component into account. Are the robots going to be red? Are there going to be traffic? Is there going to be this obstacle that potentially slows you down, etc., etc.? Now, someone once said that you cannot manage time. Time will go whether you do what you're supposed to be doing or whether you're wasting it. But you cannot manage time. The only thing you can manage is yourself. So, those are the controllables. Now, again, time is an external factor that you have no control over, but you can manage yourself, which is an internal thing, which you yourself can then manage. So if you manage yourself accordingly, if you know that you have given yourself X amount of time to get a certain job done, and you're giving yourself a realistic time frame with some breathing space in which to do that, then by all means you can do that. Now, a friend of mine, many years ago, we used to go out quite a bit together. We used to go to a lot of social clubs, and we still see each other from time to time. Obviously, our lives got a lot busier. And we were always contrasting in a sense that if I'm about 30 minutes away from a place and somebody phones me and they find out, listen, Lester, where are you now? I would usually say, listen, I'll be there in about 15 minutes. I'm on the road. And I know that I'm only leaving the house now. So logistically and realistically, it will take me 30, 35 minutes at best. But I've always been that guy that said, listen, I'll be there right now. I'm on my way, 15 minutes out. And 15 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, but, that would usually be best case scenario if I'm really putting foot down and everything works in my favor. All of the risk factors that I've not identified has not come to fruition. So those are kind of my unrealistic, diluted, or delusionally based time frames that I would give myself to get from point A to point B. This friend of mine in question, though, he would always give himself that extra bit of wiggle room. If he knows it takes about half an hour to get there, he would say, listen, I'm just leaving now. It will probably take me about 45 minutes to an hour to get there. Now, he understood something. He knows that if he gives the bad news early and he takes the hit right then and there, it is not as bad. Because if he gets there 15 minutes before the time that he said he would get there, then all is forgiven. I, however, have this fear that if I disappoint people and I don't take the hit now and I make it there in time, I've potentially missed that bullet. But 9 times out of 10, if I over-promise and under-deliver, in other words, I'm saying I'm going to be there in 15 minutes, knowing it's going to take me half an hour, and I get there late, right? I avoided the initial hit because in saying, listen, I'm going to be there in 15 minutes, it kind of calms them down because, okay, I'm going to be there soon. But the longer I take every minute after that 15-minute window, it increases the tension, it increases the anxiety, it increases the anger. And by the time I eventually get there, the hit that I now have to take is far harder because I've now mismanaged their expectations. In their mind, I've disrespected their time, and of course, it's not the best way to manage yourself in accordance with time. Now, that is just an example in my personal capacity. I'm sure you have numerous examples in your own. But what I want to get to now is if you are like me and you are overly optimistic in your own ability to get there within a certain time period. By the way, this is not just for time management. This is for everything. When it comes to payments, when it comes to getting tasks done, when it comes to getting to a certain place in a certain time period. These are things that extroverted socialists like myself tend to struggle with. Now, if you are more analytical and you're a little more introverted, you tend to not have this problem as much, okay? Because you tend to set more realistic time frames for yourself. Now, I think this is a podcast for the extroverted socialists, the sunshine yellows, the social butterflies like me. How do we manage time? How do we manage ourselves? How do we put ourselves in a position where time works for us instead of against us? And the first thing we need to do is we need to understand that if we take the hit now, it is far easier than to take the hit later, because when you take the hit later, interest and anger is added to that hit, and what could have been an avoidable argument now becomes a potentially big argument. Now it's about management of, it's about remedial management of people, as opposed to something that could have just been, listen, I'm running a bit late. I might make it there in time, I might not make it there in time, but if I don't make it in time, it takes me about 30 minutes on average, or the GPS says that I'll be there in 45 minutes based on X, Y, and Z. Let's do that, okay? And if you really want to take it one step further, WhatsApp has this feature where you have live location so they can see exactly where you are so that they can manage their expectation, manage their anxiety, especially if it's an urgent meeting that you're on your way to. But in retrospect, all of these things could have been avoided if you had just decided to leave earlier. Now, from let's say Claremont to Cape Town CBD usually takes 20 minutes. You understand that if you're leaving early in the morning and traffic is, at its peak, it's going to take you an hour. It's going to take you an hour and 15. It's going to take you an hour and a half, depending on how bad the traffic is. So if you know that you have to be there at 9 o'clock, then leave at 7. You're giving yourself 2 hours. Now, these are elementary examples of time management. I want to talk about some ideas and some tips that we can start putting in place to put ourselves in a position where we are managed by our systems instead of being managed by our habits. Okay, and how does that look? Firstly, if you are like me, and I'm guilty of it, this podcast is another example. I didn't take the time to do the research. I didn't take the time to sit down methodically, put all the points together, and then present it in an orderly manner so that I can wrap this podcast up, because the key time frame for a podcast like this is between 17 and 25 minutes. Anything less than 17 minutes, you're not considered technical and deep enough that could add enough value and substance to the conversation. Anything longer than 25 minutes for the level of content that I'm focusing on tends to be too long-winded and dragged out. So that sweet spot is between 17 and 25 minutes. Now, instead of me sitting and plotting and rehearsing and saying it's going to take X amount of time, we tend to believe this lie that we don't have time. Okay? I get up at 6 o'clock every single morning. If I make a decision to get up at 5:45, that gives me an extra 15 minutes in the day. Now, yes, sleep is important, but I highly doubt that your body's going to miss that extra 15 minutes. Worst case scenario, you can just go sleep 15 minutes earlier. Okay, but then you're still taking that same amount of time out of the course of the day. Or you can cut into something else that might be deemed as not as vital or as important to doing what it is you need to do. But again, those are elementary things. So let's focus on the important things, right? So when it comes to this podcast, I'm winging it right now because I'm talking from a place of experience. I'm talking about my own personal struggle with time management, so I can flow in that space. And yes, from time to time, I allow these podcasts to go through certain refining and editing to ensure that I reduce a lot of the ums and the ums. But I think in doing that, it also reduces the level of authenticity. Remember, my background experience is live radio, so all the ums and ahs and the unfiltered truth then comes out as a result. You cannot afford to make a mistake on air because you cannot just alt-delete, or you cannot just remove that segment of what you've said. So with this said, with radio, with podcasting, you have the advantage of going back, cleaning certain things. But if you just plan ahead, and you say, this is what we're going to do, this is the talking points that I have, it would make your job so much easier. Okay? But me, no. I told myself I don't have time. I can't get up earlier than that. I can't focus on, I can't spend another 15, 20 minutes on planning the podcast, making sure that everything goes according to plan. I give myself this excuse that, takes away the authenticity of the podcast. And maybe there are valid merits to some of these points that come through. But to a large extent, socialites, we know how to bullshit ourselves. We know how to, say something that sounds interesting and consume that own. So, if we had just taken the time to adequately plan, it would have been so much easier, so much simpler. The people that are on the other side would have gotten so much more content. Okay, so that is step one. Just put the necessary planning in place and make time to do that, even if it means that you have to get up 15 minutes earlier. The second thing I would highly suggest you do is allocate how you spend your days. Okay. A lot of people are exhausted at the end of the day because they are focused on such a lot of different activities in one day, and it takes them from this extreme to another extreme. So if on a Monday you have 3 meetings, and then between those meetings, you're doing some administration, you're doing some filing, you're also focusing on some creative marketing, you're also dealing with some staff issues and compliance issues, and then you're going to another meeting. Do you understand that each of these activities requires a different part of the brain? And it requires you to be in a different state of mind. Because when you are in sales mode, you kind of have to be a little more attentive, understanding, a little more talkative, depending on your style of selling. And all of those things come into play. And then when you go to admin, you need to be, attention to detail. You need to be focused. You need to be locked in and less conversational. And by the time the day has come to an end, you've spread yourself so thin that you don't really have any energy to spend time with the family or play with your kids or do what you need to do, which is a vital part of after work living. What I implemented a few years ago was I blocked my days to predominantly focus on one task that day, as far as realistically possible. So what I would do on Mondays is I would make Mondays my strategy days. And this is where I can put my thinking and creative cap on, and I can look at what does the next 5 years look like, what does the strategic functions of my companies entail me to to do and to focus on. And then I look at the longer term vision. I look at my goals. I'm asking myself if I'm still aligned. I compare the progress of this week to last week, of this year to last year. And I always have to do these analyses to understand and ask if I'm still on the right track, if I'm still doing what I need to do in order to get to where I need to go. Okay. And then on Tuesdays, I have what is called media days. And this is the days where we do our vlogs, our podcasts, our social media scheduling, engaging with people on social media, increasing our following, inviting new people, getting creative, doing some artwork so that we can increase our visual when it comes to the digital marketing stuff. What are we doing behind the scenes from a marketing perspective, content planning and strategy, and a lot of things pertaining to marketing, right? And then on Wednesdays and Thursdays, those are days that I want to do all of my meetings. Those are days that I want to get out there, I want to be on the road. And then on Fridays, I want to do all of the admin that I was supposed to have done on Wednesday and Thursday, especially the meetings that I've had. And I always manage people's expectations if I'm meeting with them on a Wednesday, saying that I might only get to sending them the proposal on Friday. And there's method to that madness, but I'll speak about that when we do the sales podcast again. So that would be another way to manage your expectations and manage your time, because if you are focused on too many different activities on one day, you're going to be overwhelmed, you're going to be exhausted. And if you get to a point where you're so exhausted, you might end up canceling that last meeting because you just can't, or because you're on the other side of town and now you have to make it all the way on this side, and that meeting in your mind might not be as important, or it might not be worth the time because it's only a catch-up meeting and you have to drive out 40 kilometers to get there. But if you planned it a bit better and you actually end up taking that meeting, and that meeting could be one of the contributing factors that makes this client a longer client, or it increases the LTV of this client, the lifetime value of this client, just because you actually take the time to go out there, touch base with them, find it they're still happy, get some feedback, and build the relationship and strengthen it, and taking it from there. Now, if you have any other tips with regard to time management, and again, this is just my experience, if you have strategic ways in which business owners like myself and the other analytical, more quiet businesses that tend to struggle with the same function, if you'd like to share that with me, get in contact with us. Join the Corp community, engage with us, and don't just share it with me, share it with a lot of other people that are part of this community as well, because they can also benefit from your experiences, your tips, your techniques, and what has worked for you. I'll be back next week, same time, same place. Until then, goodbye and God bless.